We've long since got used to the twists and turns of this election, straining credulity. Joe Biden has a catastrophic debate and steps down. Donald Trump is almost killed. Then the former president himself has what many consider to be a pretty catastrophic debate. But a second potential assassination attempt that is very hard to credit. And yet, this week, the talk has been of little else. Will this impact the race any more than the last? And if not, what is likely to move the dial in these final 50 days or so? Welcome to Talking Politics USA. Hello, Donald Trump has made his first public appearance since the apparent assassination attempt, speaking at a rally in Michigan. He had praised President Biden for his support at the weekend, but on stage, he once again made false claims about the election that he lost and Joe Biden won.
President Biden called me yesterday. It was very nice. We had a very nice conversation. I appreciated that he called about, what happened. And today, a little while ago, I got a very nice call from Kamala. No, it was very nice. It was very nice. It was very, very nice, and we appreciate that. We then ran in 2020, and we did much better than 2016. People don't like to hear it, oh, he's a conspiracy theorist, But we did phenomenally well, and bad things happened, and we're not going to let it happen again. And now I'll tell you, so 2016, a lot of spirit. 2020, we had unbelievable spirit. And then we got let down because what happened should never be allowed to happen in this country again.
Well, to chat about all this, I'm delighted to welcome back the journalist Jessica Taylor from the Cook Political Report, an expert on polls and trends and much else besides. Adam Hodge, who is an advisor or has been to both the Biden and Obama administrations, and our US correspondent, Dan Rivers. Hello, all of you. Another unbelievable week. Good Lord, the twists and turns of this election race is just something else. Dan, let's start with you. Where do you think we are at this point about this? Will it have an impact? And if so, what impact will it have?
In terms of this second assassination attempt, I don't think it will have much of an impact, frankly. We didn't see a huge move in the polls after the first one. They've settled down. They've been remarkably consistent, really. I'm sure Jessica can go into that a bit more. But I've just come back from Florida from covering that story, and one of the American cameramen we got chatting to at the scene said he'd been working for 30 years covering US politics, and he has never known a news period like this, where just event after event after event keep on happening at this kind of relentless pace. So it has been a hell of a roller coaster ride. But what's been incredible, really, is how flat the polls are. In the it's still a toss-up election. So I don't know if Jessica's got strong thoughts to disagree with me on that one, but that's my 2 pennies worth.
Jessica, well, let's move on to you. I mean, it seems to me that Harris has had slightly better polling numbers since the debate, but as Dan said, it's close. Where do you think we are?
We are seeing, I think, a slight uptick, at least in national polls that are now coming out. We're a full week after the debate, which is sort of the period I like to wait and see how voters react to it, sort of let it settle in. I'm a little more skeptical of, immediate flash polling right after that. So we are seeing, even 4-point lead nationally, which is significant because that's sort of the margin she needs to win by to have, I think, a more comfortable or a more guaranteed win in the electoral college. We are just starting to see some of the state-by-state polls coming out. There's some good polling for her in Michigan and Pennsylvania this morning, but those could be outliers. I think all of these states remain very, very close. And, was the debate enough to sort of sustain a polling bump? As Dan said, this race is just full of twists and turns. And you go back to sort of that really really that debate in June with Biden and everything has changed. And then after the RNC and the top of the ticket changes. So, we're 47 days out, somewhere around there. It all just feels like it is happening very quickly, and who knows what could happen next. But I do think this is still a toss-up, but certainly I think that you looked at that performance. I've been listening to a lot of focus groups over the past week as well. I think undecided voters thought that Harris did much better than Trump, and I think Trump reinforced a lot of the things about him that voters didn't like. But whether that sustains, we'll see. And, as to this assassination attempt, I'm not sure that it will move anything. I think it does seem to be resulting from a call here in Washington for increased levels of security for both Trump and Harris. So we will see.
Adam, just before I come on to you to talk about where you think the Harris campaign is, Jessica, can I just ask you one other thing about this? Because you talked about focus groups, and I'm fascinated about these focus groups because they really do tell you so much more than polls, I always think. I've heard various focus groups myself, and I find them really intriguing. A lot of people really don't seem to, a lot of the undecided voters really don't seem to like Trump, but they do quite like some of his policies. The economy is weighing on people's minds. They don't feel that she's given them enough in terms of economic policy and what she would do. When you listen into these focus groups, what do you come away thinking about what she needs to do, but also if there was really a vote today, how these people would break?
Some of them that I've listened to, I think some of them might break to Harris, or some of them, a win even might be if they don't vote for either for Harris, if they're not voting for Trump. What we have seen has been pretty consistent is that Trump has not managed to grow his vote share necessarily, even in this ensuing period, or really even from 2020. And Harris has solidified that. Some of the ones I've also heard, they do feel like, she addressed, for instance, I think a key moment in the debate was on immigration, where she hit Trump for torpedoing a potential bipartisan deal. Another key thing I'm watching here in the U.S., the Federal Reserve just announced that they are cutting interest rates. If you have concerns about inflation and the price of, the current state of interest rates, which affect home prices and loans and different things, I think that's certainly something that the Harris campaign has been waiting for, and hope that if you have concerns about the economy and how the Biden administration has been handling that they can point to this as another indicator that inflation is getting better with the Fed lowering these interest rates as well.
Adam, before we talk to you about what the Harris campaign needs to achieve in these last 50 or so days, can I just ask you about where you think they are? You've been around long enough to have seen bounces for all kind of things, convention bumps in the polls, debate bumps in the polls. Where do you think the Harris campaign really is right now before we talk about where it might be?
The sense I get from the campaign is that they are quietly confident that the things that they've been able to achieve over the last few weeks are starting to pay off. That you're seeing some polling showing that people trust her more on the economy. Just this week, a poll from the Financial Times had her up by 2 points over Trump on the economy. And when they asked people who'd actually watched the debate, that margin was about 6 to 7 points. So I think they're seeing some dividends for the more concrete proposals she's rolled out about her plans for corporate taxes, her plans to make things cost less, her plans to make housing more affordable and to build more homes. So that's all, I think, things that the campaign feels good about. I think they know that this is an unprecedented campaign. And something I'm watching out for is certainly the unrest we're seeing in the Middle East and the potential for that to inject another twist and turn in this campaign. But right now, the campaign would say, we feel good. We know we got a lot more work to do. And there's 47 days left. Whatever poll you're seeing today, I've said it on this show, I'll say it again, they don't vote. The people are the ones who are going to cast the votes. And so that's what they got to rely on.
What do you think they've got to do in the just under 50 days they've got left, and how do they achieve it? Because listening to some of the focus groups, it's clear that people wanted to give Harris a hearing, but aren't necessarily convinced about her answers on the economy, or are still worried about the economy, possibly still worried about immigration. She clearly does have some work to do with a lot of undecided voters. Given that she probably isn't going to get another debate unless you think she is, how does she land those messages, and what are the key things that you think she needs to land?
I think a couple more things she could do. One, do a couple more big interviews. And so I suspect the campaign is already talking about her starting to she did a big interview this week with the National Association of Black Journalists. Wide-ranging interview, covered a ton of topics from the economy to the Middle East to race relations. She'll, I would imagine something like a 60 Minutes interview, or another sit down with some print interviews, and interspersed with certainly battleground TV. And you saw this last week. I thought it was really smart, doing local TV interviews in the states that matter. So they were in Pennsylvania. She's next week, I think they'll be in North Carolina and Michigan. Looking ahead to those states and doing local TV on the ground is certainly an important topic to get her message and what her plans are, what her vision is, directly to the people in those states who are going to hear it directly. So that's certainly one thing that I think that you'll see them do. And two, they're just going to keep investing all the money they're raising into people on the ground who could actually turn people out to vote. There's 47 days left. Early voting has already begun. It will kick off in even more states. So you'll see an incredible amount of focus on trying to get people to go door to door, to knock on people's door to ask them to come out and vote for her. And some of it is persuasion. Some of it is persuading them to come out and vote for her. Some of them is just mobilizing. It's like, you're already on the team. Come on, let's go vote.
Dan, 2 assassination attempts. But this is an election campaign. Candidates have got to get out and about to a degree. How do you think the Secret Service is thinking about this, and how is the Trump campaign in particular, and Donald Trump himself, thinking about this? Is there any sense that some of his activities are going to have to be curtailed because the threat is extremely real, as has been now demonstrated twice?
Well, I mean, I think they're going to have difficult conversations with Donald Trump about playing golf, and that round of golf at his course in West Palm Beach was unscheduled, we were told, and so they were unable to do perhaps the level of security that they might have wanted to do. And those golf courses are very exposed. I mean, that one that we were filming at yesterday, it's right on a busy public road. It's quite difficult to, you can't just close down one of the main roads through West Palm Beach because Donald Trump's playing golf. So, I think there will be difficult conversations about that. I mean, maybe they revisit some of the security protocols around his rallies. They've gone back to doing outside rallies, or they had done. Whether they think actually that's just a risk too great, I don't know. But certainly an extraordinary turn of affairs. Just picking up on the other thing that Adam was mentioning about the interest rate cut. I think it's important we don't underestimate that as well. That's a 0.5 point cut, which is bigger than most economists were expecting. That could really put wind in the sails of Kamala Harris over the economy, which again and again is the one issue that voters cite as being the most important issue. You hear it from people a lot, and I think once people start to see that feeding through, which they might do in the next couple of months in terms of credit card payments, mortgage payments, house prices, those kinds of factors, that could really start to be a sort of October surprise, where we come a bit early at September, but certainly possibly good news for Kamala Harris.
Jessica, you spend, as we've discussed, a lot of time listening to these focus groups. Do you think it'll make a big difference? And also, do you think it'll get politicized and people will suggest the Fed was helping out Harris here? I haven't heard Trump make that accusation yet, but I've kind of imagined that he might.
Yeah. He has kind of hinted at that before, and I think I wouldn't be surprised to see him say something to that effect. I think that certainly, I think this is it will have a big impact on consumer confidence and things, but I still think, I'm watching, another key indicator I'm watching is where gas prices, they are down a little bit now. Where do those go over the next, final 6 weeks and things? Because I think gas prices are I think one of the constant reminders people have of thinking, because as you're driving down the road, you're very cognizant of what one station has versus the other, and sort of what the general thing is. So I think that's something that's constantly in the public psyche. And do grocery prices come down? Harris has really talked a lot about corporate greed and things that are driving that up. Does that message break through? Is she able to position herself as enough of a change from Biden on the economy? I think she sort of started to take this pivot in the debates, saying that, listen, what we inherited was because of Trump and coming out of COVID, and trying to put that into context. I'm not sure that it's fully broken through yet, but I think that if she can point to these, like, listen, was it a tough couple of years? Yes, but we went through a lot, and look now at the result of this with the interest rate and things coming down. Like I said, gas prices, food prices, I think, are another indicator, and things too. I agree with Adam. We've also seen some movement on the economy from that. But what Trump needs to do, and he did not do this effectively at the debate until about 84 minutes in, is just continue to tie her to Biden and Bidenomics. I was down in North Carolina recently, and the ads I was seeing just on repeat from Trump were Bidenomics, 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 tying Harris to that and stuff too. So I think if they continue to hammer that home, Harris needs to be the change candidate. And by definition, she is a change from Biden atop the ticket. And voters in focus groups that I've been watching for 4 years now consistently said the last thing we wanted was either a Trump or Biden rematch. Well, now they aren't getting that. Is Harris enough of a change from Biden, even though she is still part of the Biden administration, even though she is a different candidate? I think is one of the key indicators to look at.
Adam, I saw Anthony Scaramucci the other day saying that he thought it wasn't going to be close. Now, I don't know how much attention we pay to him. We can debate, but and for those that don't know, he's obviously used to work for Trump and is now very much not in favor of Trump, and indeed has been helping out the Democrats, spinning for them after the debate, amongst other things. But his argument was, look, Trump's character is just disqualifying, and in the end, he thinks, there will be a drift away from him in the final days as people focus on that. That struck me as, potentially wishful thinking for those that want Trump to lose. What do you make of that? And if I always ask you this question, which is a bit unfair, but if you were a Trump advisor, what would you be telling him he needs to address to make sure he's got a chance of winning this?
Well, God bless the mooch. We're happy to have him on our team, I guess, this time, as opposed to 4 or 8 years ago. I think anybody getting confident or overconfident that this is going to be somehow lead to a landslide or a blowout is completely kidding themselves. We live in America in a divided country, and Trump has said very clearly, many times, I could walk out on Fifth Avenue and shoot somebody and I wouldn't lose any votes, and he's not entirely wrong, right? I mean, that is the divisiveness and the split that we have in the country. I think if I was Trump, I would get rid of the sort of crazy people he's put up on the plane with him recently. Laura Loomer and Corey Lewandowski, his former campaign manager, now back in the fold, who were kind of egging him on some of these just crazy attacks on, as you heard in the debate about, Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs. That's kind of born out of the people who he surrounded himself with in the final days of his campaign. They're not helping. Some of the pros that have been on his team and leading up to this part of the campaign, they need to be the ones that he listens to if he has a hope of sort of changing the momentum. But right now, he seems to not be surrounding himself with any of those people. There's always a flux of voices in Trump's ear. My advice, to the extent that he wants anything from me, is to pay attention to people who are the seasoned experts who know what they're doing, and put aside the Laura Loomers and the Corey Lewandowskis of the world who just want to see Rome burn.
Dan, can we talk about Laura Loomer? Let's being careful of our words here. But, for those who haven't followed this is somebody who is, following Trump closely, who's been on his plane. There was the extraordinary spat between that other previously, and as far as we know, still mega Trump fan, Marjorie Taylor Greene, who had some pretty choice things to say about Laura Luma. I mean, it's another twist in this incredible campaign that you just couldn't make up. What do you make of that? And Jessica, I'd love to hear what you've got to say about this as well. But Dan, you first. What do you make of the Laura Luma spat and where we've got to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can say this, and we'll cut it out if I can't. But I mean, there were a lot of suggestions and rumours swirling that there was some sort of more than a working relationship going on.
For which there's no evidence, we should suggest.
For which there's no evidence and which was denied.
Yeah.
I mean, look, I met her at one of the trials. She was outside the court. Holding court, really, feted by the Trump loyalists who were there as a bit of a sort of celebrity. She's an out-and-out conspiracy theorist. She's really on the kind of fringes of what is kind of believable, frankly. But somehow she has been taken in under the wing of Donald Trump, certainly, and I presume those close to him. And I don't know what they think they get from her. It would seem to play to, the more extreme elements that already are baked into his base. But yeah, I mean, it's an extraordinary kind of turn of events. I mean, there were suggestions since then that perhaps, she'd been told to sort of keep her distance a bit more. But I don't know what Jessica thinks. It doesn't seem very smart campaigning tactics anyway to me.
Well, Jessica, let's put that to you. What do you make of it all? And does it, I mean, it's entertaining, but does it matter?
To me, it tells me something more about the state of Trump's campaign. I want to underscore that going into this cycle, this race, he had his most professional operation that he had, far more than in 2016 and in 2020, when we had sort of a rotating circle of casts of not sort of the Republican establishment or traditional Republican consultant class. He brought in two very seasoned strategists, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, that were both incredibly well respected. And I think they had also planned for Biden. There was a very good story in The Atlantic, sort of that they had this plan for Biden, and I don't think there was another sort of contingency plan, as they might have seen. This was pre-debate, of course, and you've brought in Corey Lewandowski, his former campaign manager, who seems to sort of be sowing some discord amongst that sort of, trying to potentially sort of push out LaCivita and Wiles. There's a lot of sort of palace intrigue going on. But like when I saw Laura Loomer where she is, and not just at the debate, but the fact that she flew on the plane with him to the 9/11 memorial when she has been a 9/11 conspiracy theorist and said that it was an inside job, to me, that tells me that Trump is returning to his basis instincts to these conspiracy theories. And that tells me that there is something about the state of his campaign.
Okay.
Another thing I've heard from Republicans, and Adam sort of touched on this too, is get out the vote where we are right now. There's a lot. I'm hearing some concern among Republicans about the Trump campaign's, get out the vote efforts, that this has sort of been farmed out to outside Republican groups, one being Elon Musk, another Turning Point USA. And so that's another thing I would watch in these coming days as well, that you do have some of these outside groups. Democrats have a very sophisticated get out the vote voter targeting operation, and how effective is going to be the Trump campaigns or the outside groups that are facilitating this now too.
We're going to go on to talk about Florida, but Adam, the last word on Laura Loomer and the state of the campaign to you.
The reason why I think this actually matters more than just the drama of the news cycle is because it reminds the American people about the chaos and chaotic people who were around Trump when he was president. And the polling I've seen shows that is actually something that turns off voters. And so it, as much as it is a spectacle, it is a reminder that it really has it reminds people about the chaos of his administration that hurts him with voters.
It's certainly true to say that Marjorie Taylor Greene versus Laura Loomer is one of the spectacles of the year, but that's something we've discussed. Now, one of the regular features of this podcast is a closer look at some of the key states which will play an important part in deciding the outcome of the election. For this episode of Inner State, we're talking about Florida. It is, of course, where Donald Trump calls home and where the second apparent assassination attempt took place. Mr. Trump won the state in 2020, but recent polling suggests Kamala Harris is closing in. Jessica, let's start with you. I mean, I can remember, sitting outside the White House presenting when, the hanging shards debate was the key thing. In the 2000 election, was it going to be George W. Bush? Was it going to be Al Gore? Florida seemed key. It's not been close in recent elections, and I think conventional wisdom seems to be that it's now firmly a red state. Is it conceivable it's in play this time?
I don't think it is. Also, this is the only state in 2020 where Trump increased his margin from 2016. Listen, the Latino vote there is more conservative than it's a lot of Cuban vote. Than Latino voters in Arizona and Nevada. It's important to remember that these different ethnic Latino voters are not a monolithic vote, and these are certainly more conservative voters. It's older, whiter voters, the villages, the retirement center there, it sort of personifies that. And you're right, as the late, great moderator of NBC's Meet the Press, Tim Russert, has sort of held up that whiteboard on election writing, Florida, Florida, Florida. It is no longer the center of the political universe. I do not consider it a swing state, and we haven't really seen the margins change there. The current polls show that the average is somewhere around 4 points, which may sound close, but those last few points are just a doozy in Florida. Democrats have really struggled to organize here. The state party a couple of years ago was just completely defunct. You saw them, Ron DeSantis have a massive election win in the governor's race and the Senate race that they heavily targeted in 2022 as well, which is a complete stomping, especially compared to other Democratic wins in the midterms. Florida was very much a bright spot. So again, you can talk about it. It doesn't mean that it's going to be a landslide. Florida never is, but I just those last few points, I think just the demographics of the state, the way it is, are just going to be very difficult. And I would not anticipate Democrats. There is an abortion referendum and a marijuana referendum on there that could boost turnout, but I also think just presidential year turnout is going to be very high as well.
Dan, you've just been to Florida, as you said, to cover this second attempted assassination. What do you make of it? Any realistic chance from your point of view it's in play, or no chance, as Jessica is effectively saying?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I don't think the Harris campaign is going to waste any time, frankly. They're going to concentrate on the other sort of, so-called Sun Belt states like Nevada and Arizona and particularly Georgia. I think Joe Biden lost there, didn't he, by about 400,000 votes in 2020. So, and as Jessica just said, I think all of the polling shows about a 4% gap between Harris and Trump across Florida. It's going to be difficult to shift. So I can't see it really being the big key place that it was, as you mentioned, during the 2000 election. It's just not really on the radar of battleground states that will decide this election. We could be proved wrong, the polling could be wrong, but that's consistently what it shows at the moment.
Adam, do you have any thoughts about Florida, but also about other states as we wind up here? Which are the ones that you'd be most hopeful about? Which are the ones you might be a bit worried? I saw Iowa, which we don't think of as a swing state, had a poll out this week, maybe last week, where Trump was only 4 points ahead, which is obviously a massive change from the previous poll that had been done there, which put him, I think, 18 points ahead or something like that. I mean, do you agree that Florida's hopeless? And where would you be most hopeful, and where are you a bit worried about?
Yeah, I wish it were so. I wish Florida was in play. Sadly, I think that the Harris campaign has as much chance of winning Florida as Spurs do of winning a trophy this year. So I may lose some fans of the podcast on that, but that's okay. I think the states that we're probably the most concerned about is Pennsylvania. It's just been a very stubborn state for Democrats to put away. I think Jessica alluded to earlier in the podcast. Wisconsin seems a bit more comfortable. Michigan seems like we're making some headway there. The Pennsylvania is certainly one that both campaigns know they have to win. I think we're spending the most amount of money between the two campaigns in that one state. And they really got to try to get that across the finish line, because it just makes all the other paths to victory so much more plausible. North Carolina is
Yeah.
sort of losing the football for Democrats the last couple of years. We've really wanted to win. It's always talked about as the next potential swing state to really come back into our corner solidly. But that was one that with Harris now on the top of the ticket, it's firmly back in play, and it's something that's going to be fought over until the very last day.
Jessica, can I give you the final word today, specifically about Pennsylvania? Why are the Democrats, Josh Shapiro, the governor, Democrat governor, won by pretty wide margins. Everyone tells me he's wildly popular. Why is Pennsylvania hard going for Harris? And do you agree it is hard going?
Shapiro had a particularly terrible Republican opponent there, and so I think that made a difference. Also, there was a very bad Senate candidate that year. I think Pennsylvania is those white working class voters that Democrats have just struggled with. I think someone like Shapiro was able to win them, and certainly, even though he wasn't picked as the vice president, I think he's instrumental there in helping that. And listen, Biden was from there. He was born in Scranton. He sort of had this blue collar appeal, and I was even hearing from Republicans sort of after the switch happened that it may have helped her in other states. But the Pennsylvania was still going to be tough. I think when you can just brand her as a San Francisco liberal, that doesn't play as well in the Keystone State there. Again, I still think it's very much in play, and there are more. Listen, everyone wants its 19 electoral votes. It's the biggest prize, and any way that you slice it, getting that makes it getting to 270 that much easier. But there are other paths for Harris. I have been talking with some Democrats. They were seeing a slight erosion in some of the polling, but that was pre-debate. And like I said, we did just get one very strong poll out there for Harris in Pennsylvania, but I think some of those numbers were a little too high for me. That could be an outlier. So I'm really watching the Pennsylvania polls in these coming weeks to see if that debate did make a difference there. But, you have her comments opposing fracking when she was running in 2019. She's walked those back, but you have the Trump campaign really emphasizing that. So I think it's on issues like that. It's on energy. It's on the economy. That some of her previous positions, I think, are ripe for the Trump campaign to target voters there and say, listen, you can't trust her there.
That we must wind up in a sec, but Dan, sorry, I have one final question for you, because you're spending, you spend a lot of time listening to Donald Trump, following Donald Trump around. Like Adam was saying earlier, and I think everyone agrees that if Donald Trump is going to win this, he's got to be disciplined. He's got to listen to his, smarter campaign advisors and all the rest of it. It seemed to me, like watching the debate, she went in with a very clear plan. She baited him. He fell for every single trap, every single time, couldn't seem to resist it. Just listening to some of his speeches, I mean, they're quite hard to listen to. They're quite sort of rambling, a lot of them. He doesn't seem, or hasn't seemed since Biden dropped out of the race, very focused at all in a way that any presidential candidate needs to be to win. What do you make of the last week or so? Is there any sense he's sort of getting his act together or not?
Well, I actually just watched again his speech in Michigan that was last night as we're recording this. I mean, again, it was incredibly rambling. I mean, once again, you tick off the Donald Trump bingo card of, Hannibal Lecter, of, promising all kinds of things, of, talking about his friend Kim Jong-un, the threat of nuclear war. I mean, none of this is really focusing on trying to grab those undecided voters in swing states and making them an offer about how he's going to make their life better. It seems to just be a kind of relitigation of past grudges and frankly, a lot of kind of rambling, incoherent waffle that just is not focused and disciplined. Maybe his base loves all that. I'm sure that there are parts of his base that loves to hear all this stuff. But that's not who he needs to win over. They'll vote for him anyway. Who he needs to win over are the people who are undecided, sitting in places like Pennsylvania going, well, which one of these two people is going to make my life better? Which one is presenting a coherent, optimistic vision for the future? And he's just not, presenting that. And you would think if there's any kind of political logic to all that, that would be a problem. It's amazing, frankly, that the polls are still so close. But, we've still got 50-something days to go. So, maybe there is time for things to change, if he doesn't change.
I could keep chatting to you all night. We don't have time for that. We need to let you get on. Thank you all so much. Until the next time, at least. And that's all we have time for. We'll be posting new episodes every week for you to watch on ITVX and listen to on your favourite podcast platform. But for now, from all of us here on Talking Politics USA, goodbye.